regardless of, well, first of all, the noble Lord Patel just said so many things far better than I would that I think are really important, and I agree with him on. I wanted to say a word of thanks to the noble Baronesses Bennett, Brinton and Findlay, because I actually think this discussion and this debate have revealed why this is so important. It is not just a minor regulatory matter that an SI in a back room can get through, and the fact that it's created so much debate outside of this chamber would indicate why I think it's important that we discuss this, and it's not seen to be nodded through behind the backs of the public. So I'm glad that that's happened. However, I also think I've been embroiled in discussions about this for some time, and I did want to note that the noble Lord Hunt of King's Heath really makes a good point when he says that it's become quite a toxic discussion. I thought that it was perfectly reasonable to be worried about PAs and AAs. I didn't anticipate that there was going to be this kind of savage attack on them. And I do think there's been a real scapegoating of these particular individuals, and that's not the way that we should resolve it. We should, of course, remember as well that doctors are guilty of clinical negligence, and we don't want to wander around pointing the fingers at who's more negligent. However, of course, if there are preventable never events that are as a consequence of people not being fully equipped for the roles that they're being asked to do, and by the way, they're being asked to do them they're being told what to do very often and said, go and do this, and they're not really up to it through no fault of their own, then that is a matter of concern for the public. It's the way that accountability works, and that's why we need to be very clear that there is no muddle over what somebody is supposed to be doing, that there's a narrow sense of that we're clear about what they're supposed to be doing, what they're not supposed to be doing, what they can do, what they can't do. Just a couple of things that are just a bit confusing me in the arguments that I was, in terms of the briefings we got. I mean, I honestly, I lost the will to live in the amount of rows that were going on about the difference between physician associates and assistants, as though the key differences were associates or assistants. But I think the difficulty is that if people think that any of them are physicians, because that means that they think they're doctors. And so that's the bit that's very confusing. I think it just shows that people can sometimes kind of get lost in the midst of this. I also thought that a bit of context is worth bearing in mind in relation to the public. Most of us in the public, patients, would prefer to see anyone at a doctor's practice than wait 2 weeks in pain. And that, of course, makes the public vulnerable to maybe having a lesser service. I understand that. I also thought that the noble Lord Patel was absolutely right about a big team. If you're in hospital, you're surrounded by people with a million badges on and colours on and lanyards on, and they all introduce themselves to you at great detail, and you don't care because you're ill. You just want to lie back and trust them. You assume there's a division of labour going on. And so sometimes when I was reading the briefings, it did feel as though there might be a bit of vested interest about who was regulating who and what numbers were on the badges. And it seemed to miss the point of what is the real concern, which is whether there is a sufficient clarity about the scope of PAs or AAs or whatever we call them, that there's not too much mission creep, that we have clearly defined set of protocols and specific tasks allocated. I, by the way, think it's important that PAs in GP surgeries have a very different set of protocols and scope than in a hospital. I mean, they're not the same, even though they're called PAs in both instances. That's important to note. And also, so that seems to me to be important. Also, that there's a clear sense of what's taught on those courses. I mean, people talk about the training courses and the university courses and the 2-year courses as though they're going to be the solution. Well, I worry about the credentialism that's led to too many people doing nursing degrees and not wanting to do any nursing, as an aside. But I'm also concerned about the fact that there are degree courses being trusted in this way, when if you talk to anyone who works in university or anyone who's a lecturer, they'll tell you the problems of dumbing down, grade inflation, not being sure of the product that you're getting. So I'm not sure that I trust that. And the final thing is, the NHS, all of this, we definitely need a shake-up. We know we need new members of staff. I don't want to be somebody who says only the old roles count. But I did come across something which I wanted to refer the Minister to, which was the notion put forward by Maureen Baker back in July 2014, when she was the chair of the Royal College of General Practitioners then, which was medical assistants, and described this new group of people, medical assistants, having done a visit to the United States with, in fact, Jeremy Hunt, I think, at the time, and basically described what I think we need. I don't know why we can't have them, and why we've come up with this idea. The other thing is that because I work with a lot of young people, there are plenty of bright young people who are desperate to enter medical school and become doctors, and they're not able to. Why is that? That is the kind of situation that needs to be solved, rather than just kind of making up PAs or even getting in a row about their pros and cons of them.